Stop, 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 stop. If you haven't seen part one of this best performance cars under $20,000 installment or episode, go and watch that first because it explains all the rules. It will get you up to speed. The link is up here and down there. Now for the rest of us, welcome to part two. How are you? How has the week been? Oh, good, fantastic, good to hear. Are we keen to see who takes out these next categories? I know I certainly am. Let's get into it. Going to start with Sport Compacts. Now before we go on guys, a massive thank you to Wipertech for supporting not only this video, but ReDriven in general. More on those guys later. First of all, what the hell is a Sport Compact? Well look, for us, it's a car that sits somewhere between like a hot hatch or a coupe on one side and like a muscle car slash kind of sports sedan on the other side. Basically, it's like a Subaru Impreza WRX. Actually, which makes for a perfect segue. That's right, first cab off the rank, it's the Subaru Impreza WRX. The car that arguably turned the world onto all-wheel drive turbocharged rally-inspired performance cars. The great news is there are loads of various WRXs to choose from for this budget. If you want an absolute classic, 20 grand will get you into a higher kilometre and yes, possibly quite tired GC8 or GF wagon from 1994 to 2000. How about a Bug, Blob or Hawkeye second gen car from 2000 to 2007? Or the narrow and the later wide body third gen cars from 2007 to 2014. And look, yes, Subaru fans, we know all of these have been available technically as hatchbacks, which therefore should have made an appearance in last episode's hot hatch category, but it was already pretty crowded. And when most people think of WRX, they generally think of a compact sedan, so how about just getting off our backs? Anyway, with so many to choose from, which should you buy? Well, at this budget, the vast majority available will be third gen examples. However, every generation will have its own fair share of pros and cons. The logical pick is arguably buying the most recent, lowest kilometre, unmolested third gen that you can find. However, if the booster's been turned up and if any mods have been fitted and then possibly removed before being advertised for sale, the 2.5 litre engine has an interesting reputation, so just be very, very careful. At the other end of the spectrum, the first generation GC8 cars are the classics. Hence, mint condition low kilometre examples are asking well over $30,000. But if you're happy to make this performance car purchase a bit of a project car, for those in the $20,000 realm, the smallest, lightest and most visceral of all the Imprezas is an awesome way to go. Plus the 2 litre engine is arguably stronger than the 2.5, and if you stick to a well cared for MY98 or later car, the gearbox hopefully won't explode unless you drive like a complete muppet. But what about the Bug, Blob and Hawkeye models? Well, these offer arguably the best bang for your buck, but even they have their own pros and cons. The Hawkeye is the most recent and it feels it, but it was also the first to feature the larger 2.5 litre engine. And as mentioned, their troublesome reputation can be warranted. Like head gaskets, anyone? The Bug-Eye has potentially been the least loved of all WRXs, but thanks to this, you can get mint condition, well cared for, low kilometre examples relatively easy. And with the right history, they can be a pretty safe bet. The Blob-Eye is potentially the perfect blend, but being the last of the stronger 2 litres and arguably the most popular of this particular generation, great examples do ask a premium, and unfortunately, most at this budget have had very hard lives. Overall, any Impreza WRX can be a truly great thing, but the wrong one can be an absolute bloody nightmare. Just do your homework and make sure you watch our Ultimate Used Car Buyer's Guide up here before you buy one. It's also down there somewhere. Now, if we're going to mention Subaru, it does seem only right to also include its kind of arch nemesis. It's the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo. It's not the Evolution. They ask way more than $20,000. It's the Lancer Rally Art. Often seen by the naysayers as the Lancer that you buy when you can't afford an Evo 10, the Rally Art is all too often underestimated. Let's cover the positives first. It's available as a sedan or a sportback. It's all-wheel drive. It has a punchy 2 litre turbocharged engine, and with the right suspension mods and some great tyres, it can seriously handle. But I bet you're thinking, hang on, what about that dual clutch transmission? Because aren't they basically made of cheese? Well, yes and no. See, the drama here is that it seems that Mitsubishi really underestimated the service requirements for the SST transmission. And if driven hard and serviced at the recommended 105,000 1,000-kilometre intervals, yeah, like issues can and unfortunately often do occur. However, there are examples on the used market that have been owned by fastidious fans that have changed the transmission oil far more regularly, and when driven with some level of mechanical sympathy, are showing excellent reliability. Basically, find one with an impeccable service history and an owner that clearly respects the car, and you might just end up with an incredibly underrated performance car. Also, if you're a Mitsubishi fan, there's a bit of a chance that you might like this t-shirt, and if you're a Renault Megane fan, maybe you liked the t-shirt from part 1 of this series, which is this guy. If you'd like to own one of these t-shirts, just go to redriven.com and buy them on the merch store, because you buying our shirts means that we can make more of these videos for you. Legends. Now, next up, let's take our tops off, sort of, because it's convertibles and also something kind of unique. Now, when you're talking topless performance cars under $20,000, look, obviously the iconic Mazda MX-5 Miata is the go-to, but let's just park that for a second and recommend something a little bit more unique. See, when you think of really serious performance cars like Lamborghini, McLaren, Ferrari, what do they all have in common? Rear-wheel drive and mid-engined. Well, for under $20,000, you can have basically like a diet version of the serious stuff. It's the Toyota MR2. Unlike the exotic Euros, being a Toyota, the MR2 in any of its 3 generations will offer superb reliability and are mechanically just tough little nuggets. $20,000 can get you into a higher kilometre and slightly rough around the edges first generation car from 1984 to 1989. And guys, what a crazy little car. It's not technically a convertible, but with the tiny size and body panels being only slightly thicker than tissue paper, you'll potentially feel equivalent levels of exposure to the passing scenery as you would in a convertible. Plus, to live with one of these as your daily driver, you're going to have United Nation levels of tolerance, and the levels of safety are basically on par with base jumping. But thanks to all of this, the first generation MR2 is thrilling to drive all of the time. Then the second generation, or 1989 to 1999 MR2, it is a far more mature beast, and at this budget is also available with a removable roof. Now look, $20,000, it won't open the door to the really pristine second generation MR2s or the high performance turbocharged models, but 20 grand can get you into an early 90s manual with a reasonable amount of kilometers on the clock. And like the first gen options at this price, look, while it might be a little rough around the edges, this car is sure to be a future classic, so spend some time and money getting it back to its best, and you're gonna have a very special thing. Then we come to the 1999 to 2007 third generation MR2, which could be argued is basically a cut price Lotus Elise, just with a slightly nicer interior. They even share the same engine, and the Lotus is only ever so slightly lighter. 20 grand will potentially even get you into a third gen car with a manual transmission, and as tempting as the price of the autos may seem, for the real fun, pay the premium and find a manual. All of the MR2s are getting pretty old, and even though we are talking Toyota reliability, they will require their fair share of TLC, but nothing feels and drives like a mid-engined sports car. The MR2 is more than worth considering. But look, back to the go-to car for this category. Look, honestly, these things are as equally sublime to drive as they are reliable and affordable to own. Everybody needs to drive one of these at least once in their life. It is the Mazda MX-5 Miata. Okay, $20,000 won't get you into the current shape 4th generation ND, but good examples of NA, NB, and NC are all up for grabs here. Purists and the internet love the NA, and so do I because I own one. But even though it might win on romance, nostalgia, and many of the subjective elements, it's objectively the least impressive of all of the generations. It's the least equipped, the least refined, the hardest to live with, and even when it comes to driving it, in standard form, it's the hardest to extract performance from. And in a straight line, it's also the slowest. But guys, pop-up headlights, and it's the original one. Then the NB is potentially the least loved, but this means for $20,000, you can get yourself into an absolute gem of a car. We're talking mint condition, low kilometers, and a perfect history. It's just not as, I suppose, cool as the NA or as easy to live with as the NC, but it's arguably the perfect blend of both. Overall, it's a truly excellent car. And speaking of the NC, guys, don't listen to the haters criticizing the 3rd gen MX-5 for being too big and too heavy. It's still a small rear-wheel drive topless sports car, and also being the most conservative of the MX-5 generations is a bit like being the most conservative example of homemade Russian vodkas. It'll still blow you away even in its least aggressive form. Plus, the NC is, actually by a fair margin, the easiest to actually actually live with. Plus, simply bolt on a few intelligent mods and it will deliver its own unique and equally enjoyable version of the MX-5 driving experience. Honestly, when it comes to MX-5, there is no best generation. They are all awesome in their own right. Which one you should buy really comes down to what you want from the car. But let's go and dive into the complete opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to performance cars. That's right, it's sports sedans slash kind of muscle cars. Basically big practical cars that have a stonking great engine up front and a hopefully rear wheel drive. And let's kick this off with a bit of an Aussie homegrown hero that you can also possibly buy overseas. Yep, it is the Holden Commodore, and specifically in V8 powered form. And for this budget, will most likely be in a 2006 to 2014 VE or VE Series 2, which in North America is the Pontiac G8. In the UK and Europe is sort of kind of the Vauxhall VXR8, and in the Middle East and South America is either the Chevrolet Lumina or the Omega. Now, before all the Commodore fans start yelling, the Vauxhall's actually a Holden Special Vehicles Club Sport, not a Commodore. Guys, we know that, but short of the body kit and some subtle mechanical changes, underneath, come on, it's still a Commodore. Anyway, here in Australia, for $20,000, you're going to be looking at sedans and wagons in different iterations of SS form. And our pick is to find the best condition, lowest kilometre, most recent SSV that you can, with an owner that clearly isn't a dickhead. Reliability-wise, these things are bloody tough. They're incredibly enjoyable to drive. They're practical, especially in sport wagon form. With some smart mods, they are capable of truly great things. And a mint condition example with a full and thorough service history will most likely become a future classic, as will its arch nemesis, the Ford Falcon. Sorry to our international viewers here, you might want to skip ahead because the Aussie Falcon, it never really made it off our shores. But for those of you playing at home, engine-wise, you're going to have the choice of either the 5.4 litre V8 or the iconic 4 litre turbo Barra straight 6. And the vast majority on the used market at this price point will be either of the 2002 to 2005 BA or BA Series 2. Now, there are later BF and FG examples out there, but for $20,000, they're going to be showing loads of mileage and they could be in pretty average condition. So instead, we'd be sticking with a lower kilometre, better condition, older car. And for this budget, you can get some superb examples. But which should you buy between the V8 and the Turbo 6? Well, it's a bit like the Mazda MX-5 scenario all over again. You're going to have people criticising both options here, but honestly, both the V8 and the Barra are excellent in their own specific ways. One simply isn't better than the other. Just go and buy the car that resonates with you the most. But what if like the whole big Aussie V8 muscle car sports sedan thing just isn't for you? Well, here's a fun fact that the V8 fans of you are going to be very upset about, because this next car, it tops the VE SS Commodore for the power to weight ratio, and it's objectively better built, it's more reliable, it offers higher levels of accommodation, and you'll spend less on fuel, tyres, and all of the consumables. And its parent company still exists. It's the Lexus IS 350 F Sport. That's right, the 6 litre V8 powered 2010 VE/SSV has a power to weight ratio of 135.8 kilowatts per tonne, whereas the 3.5 litre 6-cylinder 2011 IS 350 F Sport beats it with 145.2 kilowatts per tonne. Okay, granted the Lexus is possibly a little bit on the small side for this category, and in standard trim it isn't exactly engineered or tuned to offer like as overt a performance car experience as the Aussie muscle options, but for $20,000 it feels an entire class above when it comes to interior fit and finish, build quality, refinement, and as we've seen for decades now, Lexus proves to be the most reliable brand that money can buy. Plus, spend a little bit extra on some serious tyres, brakes and suspension, and maybe bolt on a quality performance exhaust system, and the IS 350 F Sport can easily unleash its substantial performance abilities. And then we have a grey import that is totally worth a mention. It's the Toyota Aristo. Basically, what you're looking at here is a second generation Lexus GS packing the same engine as a turbocharged Toyota Supra. Guys, what's not to love? Besides the fact that the car itself is more than 20 years old, and therefore so are the levels of tech and safety, and they're all autos, and the fact that many on the used market have lived extremely hard lives. Other than that, there's every chance that the iconic 2JZ engine under the bonnet will soon be worth more than the entire car itself, thanks largely to the crazy power that can be extracted from them. Plus, looking like a Lexus, the Aristo flies under the radar in terms of the looks, and you'll still receive all of the benefits that come with this generation of GS. A car that we've actually reviewed up here and down there, and spoiler alert, it was incredible. I highly recommend watching that video. Now guys, you may have noticed that across these two episodes, there was a bit of a lack of, BMWs and Renaults and Volkswagens and Audis and really much European stuff at all. Now, we don't deny for a second that European manufacturers make some astoundingly good performance cars. If anything, in many categories, when their cars are new, they arguably set the standard. But the problem is, at least here in Australia, they just don't seem to be as resilient to the sort of treatment that comes with owning and driving a performance car, especially in our conditions, unless they are fastidiously maintained, and unfortunately on the used market, many of them aren't. Plus the cost of parts and the associated labour can often cost far more. Their depreciation is generally more substantial when compared to the Japanese brands. And when this budget is $20,000, these financial factors, they need to be taken into account. If you have time and money to burn, or you are extremely talented with a spanner and just love searching for bargain parts online, or you categorically know that the Euro car that you're looking at has had an absolutely perfect history, sure, go for it, buy it. But still, it's just a bit risky. Actually, you know what? Just on that, would you like us to do a video on like awesome but risky cars and SUVs? Let us know in the comments. Actually, let us know what you thought of this video, or these two videos. Yeah, let us know in general in the comments. See you next time. And when most people think of WRX, they think compact sedan. So just get out, Seems only right to also mention its arch nemesis, $20,000 can get you into a higher kilometre and slightly rough around, and for this budget, you're going to be most likely looking in, oh, that was terrible.